Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to IndieCast. Very satisfactory that we are starting exactly at 10:00 p.m. Today we have a sort of a general topic. We've been talking about internal security issues, national security issues. We were discussing the days following the Operation Sindoor earlier. Then we were discussing the left-wing extremism in India. Both very relevant national security issues. I think around the time of Operation Sindoor, one very critical debate came up about Indian defense manufacturing. And related to that, I thought we should maybe have a sort of a general conversation about India's economy and maybe like sort of look at India's ability and a realistic examination of whether India can actually, create and bolster startups and economic indicators that can, make good defense equipment or even facilitate the creation of India's next large language model. So those kind of things. And where is India's economy locked right now? Where is our locked potential that we need to unlock and sort of create better gains for India's economy and society also? It's not, I don't want to limit this conversation to just one sphere because this is a all encompassing conversation. So let's just get Jay's take and then we'll move on. Jay, what do you think about these issues? Do you find them relevant?
I mean, of course, these issues are very, very relevant. And I think it is very important for us to have a conversation with ourselves with respect to uh, how long are we going to, wait for that, eureka moment where we finally say that, okay, this is it. This is like the perfect system that we could have established given the given the background that we have and given the resources that we have, given the population that we are working with. So it is very, very it's a very interesting time to live in right now. And जैसे हमारी अभी बात शुरू हुई about India's economy, India's approach to red tapeism, it is very important that we also understand that as we are moving towards a more privatized India, the focus should also go to this maturing corporate world in India, which evolved after globalization, after liberalization, and how a lot of reform should also be focused in that sector as well. I'm not saying state interference, I'm saying reforms where better uh, better working hours are introduced, better wages are introduced.
So you
And
mean like deregulation actually,
yeah, actually,
and you mean like maybe a degree of regulation in the labor law sense,
exactly.
but I think better enforcement. I think
Yeah.
lesser laws always imply better enforcement. So that's one way you can sort of unlock capital. मतलब मुझे हमेशा लगता है कि इंडिया में रिफॉर्म हमेशा क्राइसिस ड्रिवन होता है. So 1991 we had a balance of payments crisis, and as we should, we take credit for it. बट अगर बीओपी क्राइसिस नहीं आती तो शायद कितना और समय लगता रिफॉर्म करने में
बिल्कुल
इकोनॉमी
सही
को.
बात है.
सो लेट्स जस्ट स्टॉप being that culture which only reforms when a crisis happens, or when our existence faces threats. Only then we realize that some progress
Yeah.
can be made. Sorry, I'll just
Mhm.
finish here. That even during Operation Sindoor, it is only when uh, drones and counter drones were shooting and firing at each other did we realize, okay, now we need to start doing defense manufacturing at home. It makes you feel a little silly as somebody who's following defense manufacturing and defense technology related issues as just an observer, not claiming to be an expert. You feel a little stupid for advocating these things in normal peacetime also, because nobody takes you seriously then. So these are all related to India's economy after all.
Absolutely. AP Singh has been in complaining about India's defense manufacturing, HAL, and even after some stellar performances in Operation Sindoor, I think the stance that he took was very, very good, and it made certain government institutions accountable and made them realize कि भाई अब ऐसे ही हमेशा काम नहीं चलने वाला है
Yeah,
कि
I
आप टाइम
mean,
पे डिलीवरी नहीं दे पा रहे हो. कब से आपका कब से आपकी फिफ्थ जनरेशन एयरक्राफ्ट बनी ही जा रही है और अभी तक बनी भी नहीं है.
वो जोक
और
मारते
ध्रुव
हैं ना
पे भी
कि
आप काम करे जा रहे हो, तेजस भी आपका नहीं बन रहा है. तो so and that thing is relevant not just in the air force, it is relevant in the grander scheme of things of India as well.
yeah.
I'm so sorry,
No, no,
Raj.
that's okay. मतलब, it's like India में 5th generation aircraft का मतलब होता है कि 5 generation लग जाएंगी बनाते बनाते. I saw this. I can't take credit for this. This was a YouTube comment I read
Okay.
somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it's very refreshing to see the Air Chief Marshal at least put these issues out there, because very rarely will you see somebody from within the system say that how much of sort of a dead weight is being added onto the system because of inefficiencies by the public sector units. And this is by no means a critique of our public sector enterprises. Some have done a phenomenal job, but it's like how God, we always keep going back to Shekhar Gupta. But I think one of his episodes, I remember him saying very well that actually it was after the deregulation of the banking sector, even the performance of the SBI improved. So it's not like disinvesting some state enterprises or removing their monopoly will make them inefficient. Actually, it might increase their efficiency and make them more performance oriented. So I think the time has come to maybe be more comfortable with the private sector in not just defense manufacturing, starting with defense manufacturing for sure, but even in things that may be related to the development of a more complex AI tools, things like large language models we want to develop in India. But first, we always must re-examine our ability to be able to do that. So that's a very important tool. Like it will not, this problem will not solve itself. We had few months back the Minister for Commerce and Industry, Shri Piyush Goyal, complain about the lack of innovation on the part of Indian startups. But this is not a unilateral problem with the Indian startups alone. The Indian startups are doing what the regulatory environment is allowing them to do. I mean, imagine trying to start a weapons drone manufacturing business tomorrow in India. Where will you test fire it? Who will license it for you? How much anxiety will you provoke on part of like the various ministries who control the regulatory oversight of this business? And this brings me back to the example of the Kalyani Group, which makes phenomenal artillery guns, that they used to actually ship India's like Indian made artillery guns overseas to try to test fire them, because navigating the regulatory environment was easier over there than to do it here. So that's one of the problems that we kind of need to work around. And that's one of the areas where I feel like a lot of potential is there, but it's locked. It's locked in all this, red tape. Jay, back to
I
you.
was reading somewhere that it takes around 120 days on an average to establish a business in India, whereas in developed countries and developed economies it only takes 3 days. So that is a very good, reflection of how averse we are to, to market forces and market factors. We are so risk averse. In even, I think even our private sector has become so risk averse that it is not willing to, experiment with a lot of new things, because the regulatory environment is such that it doesn't allow that, that environment of improvisation and,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
risk taking. So you will have less and less people, experimenting with innovative ideas where they could, invest time in, say, machine learning, or new drone technology, better drone technology, and then they go back to, like, something which has already worked. And this was pointed out by Mr. Piyush Goyal as well, when he
Yeah, I mean,
said
see
that
the
everyone's trying to ensure that who gets the fastest food delivery.
yeah,
And that was more of a statement on the Indian state rather than the
yeah.
startups.
I mean, the math is simple, right? It's also a statement on the regulatory environment, but it's also a statement on risk aversion in the total societal framework, because VC money will follow startups that ensure stable return, and stable returns lie in things that have an inelastic demand, typically like uh, kirana stuff, household things, medicines. People will automatically not stop their medication or their food requirements. So it's just Indian kirana services will come on your cell phone, your medicines will be delivered on your cell phones. But after a point there is no new innovation. Like, honest to God, I can live with my butter and cheese coming 20 minutes later. But if we really wanted sovereign innovation in India, we would be working on some serious deep tech related startups, whether it is in renewable energy. We have done one episode with a brilliant renewable energy startup. You guys can go check that out later. Or whether innovation is happening in, large language models. Now we all take it for granted that we just keep saying that we will make an LLM in India. But what does that entail? That first entails a very realistic assessment of our own capacity to do so. I mean, we are in Gurgaon, which is considered one of the like hubs of India, after maybe Bangalore and Hyderabad, or maybe at par with them. And even here, electricity supply is not stable to this day. So how do you make a large language model when, if your test runs are being run and suddenly you have a power cut because it's raining outside? So these things are related. You will then need to invest in generators, then need to buy fuel, which will put such a huge fiscal burden on VCs that they will just not find it profitable.
Yeah, to add to what you're saying, I was listening to this particular YouTube video. I think it was obviously narrated by some Chinese dude, and like in that modulated AI English voice. But that propaganda video from China about India made sense. It said that there is so much electricity issues in India that because of such power cuts and load shedding, so much money and so much investment is being lost. That thing is something that needs to be accounted for and should be tackled head on, so that these problems are not faced by like startups and like upcoming businesses, for them to like flourish.
Yeah. And we talk about, see, the thing is that India is a quote unquote bright spot in today's global economy. But we have to understand that the global economy right now in itself is not in a good place. So, that's like being a one healthy organ in a very sick patient.
Yeah,
You know,
the World
we
Bank just cut India's growth
yeah.
predictions to
Yeah.
6.3%, by the
So
way.
yeah, I think
So
that being a quote
just
unquote
right now.
yeah, being a quote unquote bright spot is not enough, because we are still in our developing trajectory. We maybe had some 8.9 or some kind of 8 to 9% growth in the early 2000s, because we were seeing the benefits of the financial reforms being accruing to the economy. But I think in the early 2020s we have started sort of undoing those reforms. That was very evident in our inability to reform the litigation burden around GST. GST cases have become
IBC.
more and more difficult to deal with. I was just watching a podcast. By the way, this podcast was on Sunset TV. So this is by a platform run by the state. And by the own admission of a platform run by the state, the processes around the insolvency bankruptcy code have also become slower in the last few years. So the IBC started as a phenomenal framework. The IBC's initial few years are an actual example of how, if we try, our dispute resolution systems can work fast. If we try, because the NCLT was hearing cases and announcing sentences in, like, or no, sentences may not be the right word, but
Judgments,
announcing judgments within,
orders, whatever.
yeah, within weeks. And now I think because of the the culture of our bar and bench being so wedded to procedure, over time there has been an erosion of the original function. The original function of the insolvency bankruptcy code was resolution, and I think from resolution it has shifted to procedure and paperwork. So now,
The goal of the procedure is to maximize profit. Like, profit maximization is the final goal. Now, with respect to that, what happens is that a lot of times a lot of dispute happens, where say one party would say that they're not happy with the things that are being offered to them by the interested investors, and they would say that, what, we need an extension. So, like, an extension application would be drafted, and then the whole procedure
yeah,
just
I
like
mean, see,
goes ahead.
what you're saying is, I'm not disputing that at all. I'm just saying that this process was also being done a lot faster. Maybe by the mid 2010s, when IBC was introduced and IBBI was created as a regulator, what was happening was that dispute resolution is not the whole function A of the insolvency bankruptcy code.
Mm.
It's one of the things that is part of it. The idea is resolution. It may not be liquidation, and it was much quicker. So the committee of creditors, as you mentioned, sort of used to come and replace the board of directors, and basically the financial stresses of a company were quicker to get resolved. as a result, I think we were on the right trajectory of maybe unlocking some economic potential there. But I think over time, I think our judges and our lawyers have done an
Figured
excellent
out a
job
way
of
of,
doing what they do best,
yes,
which is to slow down this
of course.
procedure. So, there is a huge part of the melee lies with the judiciary in in absorbing the economic potential which could have helped the country grow, but inefficient judicial processes, including functions or issues which are economic in nature, which are stuck with the judiciary, cause a lot of economic growth to be stalled. Whether it is, under trials who could have become bread earners if they were released on time, or whether it is, two companies or two parties disputing within themselves. Even things like, contract enforcement, again, which is more of a, contract, it's in the sphere of contract law. Can't believe, like, I'm not blaming the judiciary for it, but it's something that's like, 10 times longer in India than it is in Singapore. And I'm not saying that we should aspire to be like Singapore, but then we should at least do a realistic examinations of where we stand. If you want to go from a student who scores 50% to realistically coming in the A plus range, you want to score 80% or more, then you first have to see where you stand, where you're going wrong, why you fail sometimes, why you are not scoring the right marks. You can't just say that, oh, I'm not failing anymore. I think for a country like India, just lifting enough people out of extreme poverty is not a realistic enough goal. That is just saying that, this patient is alive on a ventilator. At least he's not dying. And that's as inambitious as that. Just sorry, I took a long rant.
No, no, I totally agree with you. And as I said, it is just like, this whole code is also evolving with time, and as time passes, it's becoming more complicated because there are many judgments that come in between, and with these judgments, new types of enforcements and new types of interpretations come in the way. So what it does is that it really, instead of pushing for efficient resolution, you have the long drawn processes just being, just being given given impetus all over again. So it totally defeats the purpose of the code. It basically uses the language of the code in order to make it slower rather than make it more efficient. And I think that is the biggest problem of our judicial system and its various tentacles, be it law firms, be it the judges, be it the independent practitioners, because nobody out here is trying to, give efficient uh efficient systems to the people. I think when your main goal is profit maximization, pun not intended, profit maximization in the sense for from the type of money that your firm is making with respect to billable hours, or the kind of clients that you're, trying to garner in, right? From that angle, if that's your main goal, then you would want certain procedures to not be as efficient as possible. And I've seen things like that happen with my own eyes, where, you feel that this particular procedure that we are taking the client towards is not that necessary, but you're still taking those steps so that, the nature of the dependence of the client on you it just increases, and, like, keeps coming back to you. And of course, whatever I'm saying is cliched. A lot of people accuse the legal fraternity of that, but when you see that happen in front of you,
Man, I mean,
you're like,
I think they accuse it for
"Hmm,
good reason.
yeah,
Like with all due respect to the professionals in that area, I think the consulting profession also does drain the government of a lot of public funds. And my controversial view is that maybe the expanse of consulting firms within government ministries is an idea that should be revisited. I think that their efficiency may be there, but it's definitely on a diminishing returns trajectory right now. And I'm not saying this alone. The role of consulting firms within government is also being rethought by many officers of the government also. Now, I also want to pull up some statistics because we are talking about red tape and inefficiencies in our systems, because of mainly two, three factors that we've gone over. Say the lack of contract enforcement, say the poor judicial and litigation outcomes in our country, and our inability to resolve cases or commercial disputes. So about according to Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, which in today's days India's number one legal think tank, I don't even think there is a close number two. Vidhi Center for Legal Policy states that there are about 5 million commercial disputes as of today. uh,
5 million.
and the economic survey of the government of India, by its own admission, will say that about 7.5 lakh crore rupees, which is 90 billion US dollars, are stuck in tax disputes alone. So if we just work a little harder on resolving our tax disputes, how much more employment could it generate? How much more income output employment would it generate if we just spend some time in smoothing out our tax infrastructure? So 90 billion US dollars are stuck there in India. About 18 billion US dollars are locked in GST litigation alone. These stats are, by the way, by the CBIC, again a government of India run organization. 9.5 billion US dollars are stalled in infrastructure projects due to litigation. This statistic is by the World Bank, published in 2020. Now, the writing is on the wall. What do we need to do except for bold reforms? I mean, you really need to start axing out and chainsawing some government institutions that aren't acting efficiently. You need to break some monopolies, and you need to start working on our dispute resolution and better contract enforcement. And I think the legal profession in India really needs to have a serious conversation with itself, whether it wants to be a part of India's growth story or whether it just wants to increase its billable hours or get more clients. Jay, back to you.
It's just, I just don't understand. Like, I understand. Like, what? It's not about not understanding. I get that, you have to get clients, you have to make some money. That makes total sense. But coming back to the problem that we face as a country, why does that field of work feels so intense all the time?
Yeah.
It is maddening. Like, I finished my LLB in 2022. I did the 3-year law course. I was preparing for civil services, and in midst of that I thought that I'll do law. And then I thought that, what, let's try my luck out. And I was a graduate during the pandemic, so there were a lot of things that I did not get to experience, and specifically with respect to physical internships. So I naturally had a disadvantage. And when I entered this field as a fresher, my God, man, that it was just like so consuming. Like, everyone was so stressed out, so on the edge. Like, the kind of stories that I heard was absolutely insane. And, like, everything just led to some type of insult or jibe being thrown at you.
I
And
think
it
there
was
is a
just a very, very horrifying and a negative experience for a fresher like me.
I think there is an important conversation about
Yeah,
enforcement of labor laws within law firms
exactly.
themselves, rather the absence of good labor conduct, because I think they have found ways to evade enforcement of labor laws, but good or respectful conduct within law firms is absent. And I think a lot of these law firms do need regular
Absolutely, the way they
I-
treat their
like
juniors, it's
reforms.
it's evident.
And it's even evident in conversations where people
Hmm.
will casually in our age group say that, oh, law firms pay a lot of good money, but you will basically have to sacrifice your whole life and become a slave to them. So this is
Yeah,
this is not a area where labor law is clearly operating. For a government that loves its
that's what
red tape
happens
so
when you
much,
when you do
I'm surprised
retainerships,
that
right?
we missed
Yeah,
this gap.
yeah, it's
But
all.
I mean, that's another conversation for
Yeah,
itself.
of course. But
Yeah.
coming back to my point, right? So I realized that I was in a position to not be okay with that, and I left like within, like, 14 months, because I just could not handle the kind of work pressure and the how should I put this? I'm sorry I'm using this word, but the abuse that I was facing by my seniors and all the other parties that were involved. And I realized I had the option of, like, pulling the plug, but there are so many kids who just don't have the option of doing that. And then, it just becomes this very, very toxic type of generational trauma thing, where they become seniors, they become partners, and they repeat the whole thing again. So you are basically establishing this system where you feel that this is the right way to make the other party learn, whereas the other people who might be competent, who might have had the skills and might have had the determination to do something were just put off by just the general temperament and the behavior of those, those particular parties that were involved. And I'll bring you back to the theme of this particular episode. The reason why this is happening is, again, because there is just not enough right type of regulation coming in certain areas of India, in the in the private sector as well. Like you said, the law firms understood a way out of, getting regulated under normal labor laws. I mean, of course, there would be a lot of things, a lot of details that Raj and I are missing out. We'll probably cover that in the next episode. But there's
Yeah,
also
I
the
think.
example of a girl dying in, in one of the
Yeah.
big fours because of, being
Yeah.
overworked and all. Why is
I
that
mean, yeah,
happening?
legal
Yeah. Yeah.
sector slash corporate sector slash auditing and consulting firm reforms is another episode in
Yeah.
itself. That's going to be a long conversation and hopefully something that we do with somebody who's maybe been in that system for a lot longer. But I think I'll just conclude here. You know, our systematic inefficiencies, whether they are judicial inefficiencies or bureaucratic inefficiencies, are very much a tax on our economy. It's a silent tax. They, again, I'm pulling out some statistics. They cost us about 3% of our GDP. We can easily move from like 6% to 9% of growth, generating I don't know how many thousands or millions of jobs if we just did this right. We have 90 billion plus US dollars stuck in just these disputes. Business costs are as high as they have ever been. Most countries look at a lot of maybe non-legal or non-red tape related, hindrances in doing business also. They could be bribery premiums that many business persons have to pay. Those are all realistic conversations that we need to have. And this is just a time where we're either going to make bold reforms now or we won't be making them at all because the bus would have been missed. And yeah, so we need a re-evaluation of our economic abilities. We need sector wise, state wise re-evaluation of our statistics, and maybe then we can actually start dreaming of good defense manufacturing in India,
Absolutely.
state of the art LLMs in India,
Or
excellent
just being
deep tech
just
or
being a developed
renewable.
country.
Yeah.
Just being a developed country.
No, I mean we got to aim higher,
Yeah.
right? and
Yes.
and these things are possible because one thing we know where we have talent is human
Yeah.
resources.
And
you know
exactly. So in order to be a double, we look at the certain countries as, like, very, as like the benchmark. But look at how they treat their labor. Look at how well they treat their workers in general. It is not even. It doesn't even come close to how bad the treatment to juniors is in most of the firms. We've seen the things that used to go on in organizations like, most of the one of the biggest edtech companies. I'm not going to take the name, but everyone knows about it. So, and it is a very common practice, and it has been drilled inside everyone that just because someone's your senior, they can get away with anything. So, keeping that in mind, it is very important that we need to reform on so many different levels so that eventually we can, at least call ourselves a developed society. So
Yeah.
that people, like, people start taking you seriously. You have
Yeah.
so many goals for yourselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it doesn't restrict itself to, like, one domain.
Yeah.
It's
I
quite
think
interdisciplinary.
this episode was our attempt to also pull back from
Yeah.
national security, warfare, and all of that, and have a
Yeah.
conversation which was maybe on a lighter note and more relevant.
Personal also, a bit
Yeah, more
personal.
personal, more relevant, and I guess more important for our day-to-day activity at the moment. So let us know what you think. Give us feedback
Thank you.
and like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for
Thank you.
subscribing, and
Bye.
bye bye.